Jojo's Bizarre Adventure is one of those shows you've heard about even if you don't like or watch the show or even anime. I mean, the show has one of the craziest fan bases out there who just seem to be on every corner of the internet. It seems like you can't go anywhere to escape the same goofy-ass memes. Don't get me wrong, this video isn't some kind of hit piece on the show and I'm not saying it's even bad, well most of the time. I consider myself a fan of the show but I have issues with a lot of the stuff that happens in it. So please keep an open mind while watching this. Now I've been watching this show for a while now, about 2 years. To be honest, I'm mainly watching the anime due to the fucking memes, curiosity and recommendations from a few friends. And I gotta say I was either that impressed or disappointed by what I had seen. Well actually I was pretty, since every nigger and their mom hypes this show up to oblivion. Now don't get me wrong, it's better than most anime, but is that even really some kind of an achievement? Most other animes are dogshit as with most things of any genre. So, why do I think the show is mid? Why isn't it one of the greatest pieces of literature known to man? Why isn't Araki worshipped like the god he is? Let's just get straight to it. Also, spoiler warning. I guess I should start from the beginning. Jojo Part 1 is pretty stinky, which most of the fan base actually seems to agree with. I mean, this is like Araki's first proper manga, so I'll cut him some slack. I really like Dio. I like how he's just a dickhead and has a huge superiority complex. IDKY people try to act like he's some kind of super complex villain even though Araki himself said he was born evil or something. The intro for the anime is also pretty good. Speedwagon carried the parts without Dio. This part also has a pretty nice ending. But let's be real, the negatives outweigh the positives here. Jonathan is pretty bland as a protagonist and is a bit too goody two-shoes. Having a good guy protagonist isn't a bad thing, but this guy has barely anything else going on besides wanting to stop Dio. The fights are slow, most characters are lame and the middle part is boring as shit. 4/10 Part 2 is a pretty big step up in quality tbh. Joseph is a much better protagonist due to the simple fact that he has a personality. He's a goofy dickhead who is also surprisingly smart. When you compare him with the rest of his competition, it's no wonder he's most people's favorite Jojo. The side characters are also much better because there are more than 3. Caesar is great, Lisa is pretty good, and Straheim was Loki the goat. Who would have thought that a literal Nazi would be one of the best characters in this show? Let me calm down before I start sounding like Kanye. The Pillar Men are great antagonists and manage to stay threatening while being goofy as fuck, and their theme song slaps. When it comes to flaws, I don't really have many, except for the fact that Joseph beating cars was one of the biggest dispels of all time. Dog, his IQ is 400 and he can literally copy any living organism, but he's outsmarted by some British guy. Also, Joseph marrying Lisa was out of nowhere. But to be honest, there are really any other critiques I have for Part 2. It's my second favorite part, solid 7.5. This part also has the best anime intro of all time. Now Part 3 is somehow the most popular part of the whole series, but I also think it's the most overrated. I genuinely just don't get how people think this is the peak of Jojo. Personally, it's the biggest piece of dogshit. Nah, but seriously, I don't get the hype. Dog, this part is long as shit, 39 fucking episodes. There are so many episodes that feel like they would be filler for Naruto or any early 2000s anime. The episodes are really formulaic with the niggers going somewhere. This must be the work of an enemy stand, overly cerebral fight scene and aura. The formula does work well sometimes. Like with that Hanged Man episode, but I found most of the other stuff pretty boring tbh. The amount of pain I felt every time I realized that certain really boring episodes would be a 2-parter cannot be communicated with words. I won't even lie, at a certain point, I just skipped like 5 episodes, and I still knew what was going on. Part 3 does start to pick up for me around the time they arrive at Dio's house. The fights with Vanilla Ice and Dio's world carried this part from being a straight 3 in my book. Dio vs Jotaro is one of the best fights in anime, hands down. I like most of the characters in Part 3 probably more than almost all other parts. Despite what many people say, I personally think Jotaro is the best Jojo. Even though I like a decent deal of stuff from Part 3, the fact that I found the majority of the season boring brings it down to a 5/10. Everybody knows part 4 is good, so I'll keep this short. Part 4 is easily the best part of Jojo that I've seen so far. The slice of life formula really works well with all the wacky shit that goes on. The beginning is kinda slow, but that didn't really bother me. The character writing in part 4 is probably Araki's best so far. He does a good job at getting you to care about niggas like Rowan, Koiki, Shigechi and so forth. Yoshikage Kira is also the GOAT. He kills people for fun and has waves, need I say more? He's also somehow a better dad than most people in this entire series. The side quests are actually pretty entertaining and actually introduce stuff which affects the main story. They also don't take 20 fucking episodes to wrap up. The final arc was pretty tense and has you wondering how they'll beat Kira's new broken ass abilities. In conclusion, it's like an 8.5. So for part 5 I feel no strong emotions for it. I mean, there's nothing that really blew me away. I don't really like most of the characters in Golden Wind, save for Diavolo and a few others. I find Giorno to be pretty lame tbh, I guess his powers are pretty cool and his backstory is pretty interesting. But other than that, I don't really like him all that much. Dog. This guy is the son of the main villain of the entire series and it's only addressed in the first episode. I felt like a lot of the stuff I didn't like from part 3 are present to a lesser extent. Although I enjoyed a lot of the season, most were parts that I could do without. Dog. Some of this shit was boring as hell or dragged on too long, in my opinion. Also, IDK if it was just translations or something, but I was pretty confused as to what Diavolo and GER's powers were when I first watched. I had to watch videos explaining that shit. The stand powers here are pretty creative and make for mostly interesting fights. Also, Risotto is overpowered as shit, how did he lose that fight? There was just a lot of bullshit going on like in part 3 and some lame characters. Overall, it's like a 5/10, pretty mid. I'ma be real with you guys, part 5 is as far as I've watched so far so I can't elaborate much further. From what I've heard, it's mostly mixed reactions for part 6 and part 7 and 8 are said to be some of the best parts of Jojo ever. I mostly just made this video due to the fact that to me, Jojo's pretty overrated. I heard people calling this the greatest anime of all time or peak fiction. Personally I just don't get the hype. Araki will sometimes just forget about powers people have or even plot points. Remember when Dio could shoot lasers? That sure would have come in handy in part 3. His writing is also pretty messy, I mean in part 5 he made a guy too powerful so he just wrote him out of the show. If there's one universal compliment I can give to Jojo, it's that the music and sound design is elite. The intros are probably the best out of all animes. If you watch them with context they low-key spoil the whole season and I like how they occasionally change to fit the story. But TBH, Jojo to me is at best above average overall with peaks like mountains and lows like the Mariana Trench.